"You're going to have sex with me," said the Virgin. Women he discovered in his abandoned rancho. The wind moved low across the dying grasslands, brushing against the warped fences like a whisper trying to be heard. The land had long since stopped waiting for footsteps. Nothing passed through this part of the county anymore. No wagons, no trucks, not even the hawks that once circled for prey. Just dust, sun, and silence. William Hart climbed out of his truck slowly, one boot thudding against the dry earth with a grunt of pain from an old hip injury. He stood still for a moment, looking at what remained of the ranch house that had once held his boyhood summers. The windows were broken, the barn slouched like it had been punched in the gut. The porch door tapped in the wind like a slow heartbeat. He hadn't been back in 12 years. The old house hadn't called him, but the letter had. A neighbor had written, said they saw smoke once, movement maybe, lights at night. William had no family left here, no reason anyone should be in his father's house. He came not out of hope, but a need to settle something inside himself, closure, maybe, or guilt. The hinges of the front door groaned as he pushed it open. The air inside was thick, stale with old wood and rain rot. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light. He stepped through each room slowly, like walking through a forgotten photo album. Kitchen, living room, the hallway where his brother once tripped and bloodied his nose, all untouched, all empty. Until the sound. It came from the back room, soft but sharp, like someone had knocked over a chair and quickly tried to put it back upright. He froze. Hand drifting toward his side out of habit, though he didn't carry any more. He stepped forward, boots soft now. The back room was darker, curtains drawn, air warmer. He reached out and pushed the door open. There she was. A young woman, maybe 20, standing beside the old bed, her arms clenched around herself, her dress wrinkled like it had been slept in for days, barefoot, pale, hair like black threads stuck to her cheeks. Her eyes locked on his like a cornered animal, but she didn't run. She didn't even flinch. She spoke first. Her voice was calm, not a whisper, not a shout. "You're going to have sex with me." William blinked. The words hit like a slap made of ice. He stepped back once, unsure if he'd heard right. She didn't move, didn't explain, just stared, her small shoulders rising with each tight breath. No threat, no seduction, no shame, just a sentence from someone who looked like she had nothing else left. For a long moment, neither of them moved. William stared at her, as if the dust in the room might shift and reveal something more logical, a trick, a setup. But the truth was clearer than that. Her words hadn't been seductive. There had been no invitation in them, just survival, as if she were offering up the last thing she owned because the world had taken everything else. He stepped back into the hallway, ran a hand across his mouth, and leaned against the wall like the air had turned too thick to breathe. His chest felt tight, not from anger, not even confusion, but recognition. He'd seen that look once before, a long time ago. Different face, different setting, but the same vacant strength, the same hopeless kind of bravery. Her voice. It had cracked beneath control. A practiced line rehearsed with the finality of someone who'd already made peace with being broken. He stepped back into the room, slowly this time. "I'm not here for that," he said. She didn't answer. She didn't seem relieved, just stood there, unmoving, her hands gripping her elbows, like she was the only thing holding herself together. "How long have you been here?" he asked. Silence. Her eyes flicked toward the window but gave nothing away. He noticed now, a tin can near the bed, crusted soup inside, a folded quilt. Someone had been living here, hiding, more likely, for days, maybe weeks. Her lips trembled slightly, not from cold, from control slipping. But still, she said nothing. He remembered a winter in Germany, the war. A boy had come out of the trees barefoot, wrapped in a coat 3 sizes too big, offering his shoes to a dead soldier just to buy a ride in the back of their truck. No English, no pleading, just eyes like this girl's, hollowed by things no one should see. William turned away. He should call someone, the sheriff, social services. He should walk out, pretend he hadn't seen her. Maybe she was dangerous. Maybe this was some trap. But his boots wouldn't move. He glanced back once more. She was still watching him, still waiting. But there was no threat in her, no defiance, only a question her mouth didn't ask. Would he be like the others? Would he take? Would he leave? Would he pretend she didn't exist? William looked down at his own hands. They were shaking. He hadn't noticed. He took off his coat and laid it on the chair beside her. "You're safe now," he said quietly. "I'm not going to hurt you." Still, no answer. He stepped out and returned minutes later with bottled water and a blanket from his truck. She didn't move, didn't say thank you. But when he placed them on the floor and turned to leave again, her hand darted out and caught his sleeve, just for a second, just enough to say, "Don't go yet." And that was the moment he chose, not with a speech, not with a plan, but with the silence between two people who had survived too much and didn't know how to say it out loud. It was just past noon when William stepped out to the porch with a thermos of coffee and a head full of unease. The girl, still nameless, had barely spoken, just nodded once when he asked if she was hungry. She hadn't eaten more than a few bites. Her body moved like it had forgotten how to feel safe. He didn't ask more questions, not yet. But she kept glancing out, the windows like something was coming. He lit a cigarette and stared at the long dirt road leading to the ranch. It had been quiet for years. But now, every sound, a crow's call, a gust through the weeds, seemed louder, closer. By late afternoon, he found her standing outside the barn. She wasn't wandering. She was watching the horizon. "Are you looking for someone?" he asked gently. She flinched but didn't turn. "Are they coming for you?" Her jaw tightened. After a long silence, she spoke. "My name's Clara." It was the first time she'd said anything more than a sentence. He waited. "I ran," she added, barely above a whisper, "from the men my uncle sold me to." William's breath caught. She turned to face him then, her eyes sharper now. Not fierce, just full of facts she wished weren't true. "They brought girls to that house by the river, young, quiet, ones nobody missed. They gave us new names, taught us what to say, what not to say. Some girls got taken away, some didn't come back." He felt something in his chest snap like a dry twig. "How did you get out?" "I jumped from the truck while they were stopping for gas. I don't know if they're looking for me, but I know they will." William looked out toward the trees. The vast nothing around them now felt like a trap, not a sanctuary. "Why here?" She hesitated. "One of them had a letter, a property record. Said no one came here anymore. I remembered the name. Hart Ranch." She looked up at him now. "I thought maybe no one would come looking for a girl in a place forgotten by everyone else. But someone had come. Him." That night he stayed up with the shotgun across his knees. No lights on. Just the wind and the sound of her footsteps pacing sometimes across the floorboards. In the morning, he found tire tracks near the edge of the property. Not his, fresh. Boot prints in the dirt near the fence, a cigarette butt still, warm where it had been crushed. They were already looking. He didn't tell her, but she seemed to know. When he brought her breakfast, her eyes didn't leave his face. "I can go," she said quietly. "I don't want to bring trouble." William shook his head. "You didn't bring it. They did." He didn't have a plan yet, but the ranch wasn't just his anymore. Not now. He'd lost too much by turning away before. His brother, his silence, The things he let happen in the name of minding his own business. Not this time. This time, he would stay, even if it cost him everything. The next day broke cold. The sky was a pale, colorless grey. Somewhere, birds called across the distance, but their song sounded distant, like memory. Clara sat on the porch steps with her knees pulled to her chest, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. William didn't say anything. He just set down a mug of tea beside her and sat 2 steps away. They watched the wind move through the brittle grass like fingers searching for something lost. No words passed between them for hours. By noon he walked her to the shed behind the barn, pulled open the old trunk buried under spare tires and rusted tools. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay a .22 rifle. He held it out without explanation. She stared at it, unsure. "You don't have to use it," he said. "Just know how." He showed her how to check the chamber, how to load, how to hold her stance. She never asked why. Later she followed him to the coop, helped him gather eggs. She flinched at the chickens at first, the sudden movement, the noise, but her hands steadied. By evening they were at the stove together, silent, breaking the eggs into an old iron skillet while the wind howled against the windows. When he handed her a plate, she didn't say thank you, but she sat across from him and ate everything, slowly, carefully, like it was the first hot meal she'd had in weeks. That night, he lit a fire in the main room. She curled up in the corner armchair, a book on her lap. Though she didn't turn the pages, he watched the flames instead. His mind drifted, not to the men who might be tracking her, but to his brother, Tommy, younger by 2 years. He'd been loud, full of light, gone now almost 16 winters. Suicide, they said. But William always wondered if it had started long before. In the silences, the bruises they never spoke of from their father's hand. In the nights when no one came to check on the crying. Clara spoke suddenly. "I was 12 when my mother died. That's when he came." She didn't explain who. She didn't need to. William's eyes met hers. Something heavy passed between them. Not pity, not rescue, just a dark mirror held up, shared for a moment. "You blamed yourself?" he asked. She nodded. He did too. A long silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just full. When the fire cracked, she stood and walked over to him, sat on the floor beside his chair, her back resting gently against his leg. He didn't move. She didn't speak, but her head tilted slightly toward his knee, and he let his hand rest on her shoulder. Soft, still, careful. Not possession, just presence. And in that quiet space between grief and survival, something unspoken bloomed. Not love, not yet, but a kind of peace that only broken people can give each other, when they stop pretending they're whole. It was just past dusk when the truck appeared. A black pickup, windows tinted, tires thick with red dust from the canyon roads. William saw it coming long before it reached the gate, a dark speck against the dying sky. He didn't say anything to Clara, just closed the curtain quietly and reached for the shotgun leaning against the wall. She knew, anyway. Her body had already tensed. Her breathing had shortened. Her eyes locked on the door like it might vanish. "Go to the root cellar," he said. "Through the pantry. Take the rifle. Stay quiet." She didn't argue, didn't cry, just disappeared down the hallway like a shadow fleeing the light. The truck rose, out to a stop in front of the house. 3 men got out, not boys, not drifters. Men who'd done this before. The one in the middle wore a leather jacket too clean for ranch country. His hair slicked. Back, his mouth curled like he was about to offer a deal no one could refuse. "You, William Hart?" he called out, voice casual, confident. William stepped onto the porch, the shotgun resting in the crook of his arm. "I am," the man smiled. "You've got something that belongs to us." William didn't blink. "Nobody here belongs to you." That smile widened. More teeth now, no warmth. "She's not your concern, old man. She ran, that's all." You give her back, this ends clean. And if I don't? Another man stepped forward, hand brushing his belt, where a pistol holster gleamed beneath his coat. We make it messy. The wind picked up. For a second, nothing moved. Just the groan of the barn roof, the cry of a hawk overhead. Then William took a single step off the porch. I buried my brother because I kept my head down once, he said quietly. Let things happen, I should have stopped. Not this time. The man in the leather jacket laughed. Sharp. Mean. You think you're some kind of hero? William raised the shotgun. No, I just know how to shoot. The first shot split the silence like thunder. One of the men dove for cover. Another screamed, dropped, clutching his thigh. The third ran behind the truck, firing blindly. Bullets cracked against the porch rail. William took cover behind the column, breathing steady. Then, a pause. Footsteps on the porch behind him. He turned fast, gun half raised, but froze. Clara stood there, hands trembling, the rifle clutched tight against her chest. I couldn't stay down there, she whispered. Not again. Not hiding. He wanted to tell her to go back, but he saw something in her face. Fire, fear, freedom, all tangled into something fierce. Another shot rang out. This one cracked the air inches from her shoulder. She didn't flinch. William swung wide, fired once more, this time into the truck's engine block. Smoke hissed. The remaining man cursed him. Eden dropped his gun, hands up. All right, you win! William didn't move, just stared, gun raised, until he was sure. Then finally, silence returned. He turned to Clara. Her chest rose and fell like she'd been running for years, and just now stopped. They were both shaking, but they were both standing. And for the first time, it wasn't just survival. It was defiance. It was choosing not to be prey anymore. The smoke from the truck curled into the sky like a ghost leaving the land. The man in the leather jacket lay on the ground, clutching his leg, bleeding through his jeans. He wasn't dead, but he was done. His voice, once loud and oily, now trembled with panic and disbelief. Clara didn't look at him. She stood beside William, the rifle still in her hands, though her grip had loosened. Her eyes weren't on the fallen men, they were on the horizon, like she could see something beyond it now, something she hadn't believed in until this very moment. Freedom. The sirens came late. A neighbor had called, maybe from miles away. Out here, even gunfire took its time to matter. 2 sheriff cruisers, dust trailing like shadows behind them. William lowered his weapon before they arrived, hands up. Clara did the same. The officers saw the scene. Weapons, blood, smoke. They knew something more than trespassing had happened. The older one recognized William, nodded once. No handcuffs. Inside the house, Clara sat on the edge of the bed where she'd first stood days ago. The blanket was still folded, the soup can still in the corner, but everything else had changed. William leaned against the doorframe. They'll take him in, the others too. She didn't respond. They'll want to ask questions. Still nothing. He stepped closer, slower, sat in the old chair by the window. For a long time the room held only silence. Outside, the officers loaded the wounded man into the back of the cruiser. The ranch creaked and sighed around them, the barn groaning in the wind, the gate tapping like a clock with no hands. I'm not going anywhere, William said quietly. That made her look up. Just for a second. Just long enough to see that he meant it. That night, after the cops had left and the sun had collapsed behind the hills, they sat together by the fire again. No food. No tea. Just warmth and the echo of survival. She reached for his hand without words, placed it in hers, both of them calloused, bruised in different ways. He let her. No promises, no plans. Just breath and presence. The storm had passed, but not everything was whole. The fear would linger, stitched into muscle memory. The shadows of the men, the house by the river, the silence she'd carried in her throat for years. None of that vanished with gunfire. But something had cracked open. Not healing, not yet, but the chance for it. In the middle of the night, William woke to the sound of the screen door creaking open. He stepped into the hallway, shotgun ready again out of habit. But it was just her. Clara, barefoot, walking into the field under the moonlight. She stood in the tall grass, eyes closed, head tilted to the sky, like she was listening for something only she could hear. He watched her from the porch, said nothing. She turned once, met his eyes, and nodded. A quiet thank you. A quiet, stay with me. And in that stillness, no words were needed. Only the soft rhythm of the night, and the weight of two people who had chosen to stand between each other and the dark. The seasons changed quietly. Summer came with long days that smelled of dust and dry wheat. Then fall painted the trees orange and gold, and the cold returned, pressing gently against the windows like a reminder. But the house no longer stood in silence. Clara stayed, not as a guest, not as a secret. She simply stayed, because no one asked her to leave. She helped with the animals, fixed the old porch swing, laughed once while painting the barn, streaking red paint across William's sleeve on purpose. He didn't scold her. He just let it stay there. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't. But the silence between them was different now, softer, no longer filled with fear or shame, just space, shared space. Once, near winter, Clara found the shoebox in William's closet. Inside were old letters, faded photos, a dog tag, and a crumpled photo of a young man. Tommy, his brother. She didn't ask questions. She simply folded the photo, placed it on the mantel beside the cracked clock, and lit a candle beneath it that evening without a word. He noticed. And that night, for the first time, he told her what happened. No tears, just truth. Wounds passed into air. She listened, didn't try to fix him, just stayed beside him until the fire went out. Later that month, they built a small wooden marker at the far edge of the land, near the willow tree that bent like it was always bowing to the earth. It wasn't for Tommy. It wasn't for the girls Clara had left behind. It was for all of it. Everything they couldn't name but wouldn't carry alone anymore. The world didn't come knocking again. The men had disappeared into the system, or vanished. William didn't ask. Clara didn't care. They didn't run. They didn't explain. They simply lived. Quietly. On land that had once held ghosts, and now held a kind of peace. One night in spring, Clara stood barefoot in the kitchen, frying eggs by lamplight. William leaned in the doorway, watching the way the light caught her profile. She turned, caught him staring. "What?" she asked, smiling. He said nothing, just stepped forward and kissed her forehead gently. Nothing owed, nothing taken, just given. Years from now, no one would know what had happened on that ranch. No plaque, no headlines. But somewhere in the worn floorboards, in the wind that curled past the willow tree, in the faint scent of firewood and soap, their story would stay. Unspoken. Unwritten, but never unlived. And in the quiet that followed, their hearts made peace with the things the world had broken, and finally stopped waiting to be whole.